For nearly a month, I have been waiting for this moment, and now it is finally here. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I requested Josh Duggar's emails from the Washington County Detention Center, covering the period from the day of his conviction until he was moved to Seville. And I received 350 pages of text messages and emails. Let me tell you, my sources were incredibly accurate about how he was behaving, what he was saying to Anna, how Anna was reacting, and also about Jim, Bob, and Michelle. The sources were right about how the family would say one thing publicly but act completely differently in private, and about how the siblings were all in conflict with each other. Something I never expected to see was Josh asking Anna to send him what can only be described as suggestive pictures, like in a bathing suit. I think we all know what that implies. He did not communicate much with his siblings. In fact, only two of them reached out to him, John and Jessa. Jessa contacting him was a real surprise to me. Josh spent a great deal of time expressing his anger and frustration toward his parents and siblings. He also pushed some very unusual conspiracy theories while convincing Anna that another person, Caleb Williams, was responsible for everything. And unbelievably, Anna fully believed this and became angry at the Duggars, telling Josh he needed to distance himself from his own family. There is so much here that I do not even know where to begin. While reading through everything, I took pages of notes. The messages between Josh and Anna go back and forth between religious talk, where they sent scripture to each other constantly, and deep personal complaints. Josh spent a lot of time focused on Psalms, similar to his brother. There was a lot of self-pity and playing the victim. It became very clear that during this period, Anna was not happy with his family. On New Year's Eve 2021, Anna sent an email saying that what looked like one of the most promising and happy years of their lives turned out to be the hardest by far. She wrote about spending the next entire year separated, and that it was only the beginning. She asked where justice was and why this was happening, saying that she knew God was good but needed to actually feel it. She admitted that what she felt hurt and did not make sense. She told him she did not want to emotionally dump on him, but explained there were not many people who understood. She mentioned that one of their children was changing every day and was very coordinated, and that she was proud of their family. But then she said that without him there, the hurt went deep. Josh, during his incarceration, did a lot of what I would call love bombing. He constantly praised Anna, told her how great she was, warned her that the enemy would attack them, and encouraged her to stay strong. But this video is mostly focused on what he said about his family, his yelling at people, and the real inside information about how he feels about his parents. On February 1st, very early in the morning, he sent Anna an email saying he was trying, and that it was so hard to keep the right perspective. He admitted he was mostly focused on the injustice he felt, that he was having a hard time forgiving, and that he had many unanswered questions. He asked her to pray for him to have peace. He said he was thankful for many things but that sickness and anxiety were wearing on him, and he mentioned having had COVID. He complained about lack of sleep and said he wished he was getting 8 to 10 hours.
Can you imagine?
Then he wrote something very significant. He said he had measured success all wrong for years and had failed to break the chain with their children until now. He wanted his children to learn God's standard for success. He admitted that the materialistic focus in his family was not balanced enough. He said he had been so focused on money and on reaching the next level, like a video game financially, instead of doing fun activities or traveling for missions. He said God had financially pulled the rug out from under them and that he believed God was forcing them to focus on his will. He also said he was convinced God wanted him to work in politics, specifically in criminal justice reform. He admitted that he had run to the comfort of money and success instead of following what he believed was God's call. He said they should pray about it and not make any decisions yet, but that he wanted to surrender to whatever God led him to do. He apologized for dumping all of that on her that morning. So here we have Josh admitting that his family is materialistic and that they view success as money and reaching the next level. I believe that mindset has been instilled in almost all of the children at this point because most of them are very heavily focused on that kind of success. That is not to say Josh is a victim, but it does show what is happening behind the scenes. It became very clear by February 18, 2022, that Anna had her own grievances with his parents. She sent him an email in the morning saying that she knew God cared, and that even though she was really mad about the whole situation, she felt it could have been prevented if they had had some boundaries. The boundaries she referred to seemed to be about hiring certain people and staying away from his family. She said she was praying and hoping for the best possible outcome, and that her heart hurt for him. Then she made a very striking statement. She said his parents were nice and kind in quotes, but that they had been tearing him down for decades and thought it was okay because they did it in a sweet tone. She said what had been going on was not okay. She prayed that he would find who he was based solely on faith, not on his family's opinions. She told him to ask God to show him who he was created to be and to let that be the foundation of his soul. She wrote about being passionately loved and bought with a price. She encouraged him to stop compartmentalizing and forgetting the pain, saying he had to go there even though it would not be pretty. She said he needed to open areas of his heart that had been shut since childhood and ask for healing. She admitted that they had good reason to be bitter, but said they did not have a right to be bitter. Then she told him she loved him and was sharing her heart. What is interesting here is how everything is framed as everyone else's fault for the choices Josh made. Anna says there are things from his childhood he needs to address with his parents, and she continues to blame Caleb even though there is zero evidence he was involved. The two of them are clinging to this idea that Caleb did it, when the truth is that Josh knows what he did. He is leading her down a path of lies and deception just to keep her holding on. If you really think about what he is doing to her, it is cruel. He has convinced her that Caleb is responsible, that his parents are responsible, and that other people are responsible but not him. That is not to say those other people did nothing wrong on their own, but in Josh's case, he is the one who committed the crimes. He also clearly does not like Austin and Derek. He uses initials to refer to them. When Anna was going to a wedding, Josh wrote a long message saying that many of the people lashing out are hurting, and that they are hurting others because of their own insecurities and hatred toward him and other family members. He said they use any excuse to justify their mean-spirited actions. He claimed that nothing could justify what they have done. He went on to say that God is near to the brokenhearted, not to those who pile on with the world. Then he specifically mentioned two people who criticized someone he referred to as DW, and he named D and A, which he identified as Derek and Austin. He claimed both have unresolved issues with a deceased father and an incarcerated brother. He said Derek's father is dead, and Austin's brother was in prison. He said no amount of time would heal wounds they have left untreated, and that they have never made things right because of their pride. He said he was praying that God would bring them to their knees, and that they would taste their own medicine. He said they could not make that happen, but God could. Then he talked about heaping coals of fire by responding with kindness and taking the high road, but he also said there would be a time to call some of these people out. Multiple times in these emails, Josh asked Anna to use her platform to post messages he wanted her to say, and then she would do it. I think it is unreasonable to be angry at Austin and Derek in this situation because both of their wives were directly affected by Josh's actions, so they have every right to feel the way they do. However, Austin's behavior involving Joseph is very confusing. It is clear that Anna has fully bought into Josh's victim narrative, believing that he is the victim of everyone else. In May 2022, on their anniversary, Anna wrote him a message saying she did not understand why they were where they were, that it did not seem fair, and that it did not make sense. She said she knew she could trust God and that he sees the bigger picture, and she hoped they would learn from this. She prayed that Josh would love God, obey him, and serve him passionately. She said she felt like he had not had a very fair life. She wrote that he was striving so much to please his dad, and that it was a dead-end road, but he kept trying. She told him to let go of being a Duggar, and whatever that meant in his mind. She said the voices of his dad, his brothers-in-law, and his siblings had been primarily negative since he was 10 years old. She said that who they say he is not who he really is, and that he needed to find his identity elsewhere. She also referred to more personal conversations between them, but that is a topic for another video. She has for sure accepted the narrative that anyone who has issues with Josh has no right to have those issues. At the same time, there is some truth to the fact that his parents' choices when he was a child set the stage for him in very damaging ways. These emails also show that privately Jim Bob was telling everyone that Josh was innocent, but to Josh himself, he was not saying that at all. Not long after Josh was sentenced, he wrote to Anna saying that he now saw that almost no one really cared about him, to the point that they did not even believe in him and thought he was some kind of monster as portrayed by the government. He said they were buying into the lies they wanted to believe, so they could write him off. He said he wished he had listened to Anna's advice over others because she actually loved him and they did not. He said he put way too much faith in his dad's opinions, but now his dad was not standing by him and was instead attacking him to others without humbling himself to see his own role in everything. He mentioned controlling behavior and manipulation and said he could have stood up to it. He apologized for not listening to her and said she made good decisions and gave the best advice. He then talked about not needing certain things in their marriage anymore and how they had a more adventurous relationship even while he was incarcerated. He also mentioned pain from past events in Washington, D.C. and the Ashley Madison situation, saying that Anna had endured so much more than he had. Josh's negative feelings toward his parents were not alone. By June 2022, Anna was also very unhappy with them. She wrote to him saying it had been a rough day, that she felt discouraged, and that apart from Faith she did not know how she was going to make it through. She said she felt like the world was closing in on her, with pressure and judgment from all sides. She said his parents had moved on with their own lives and had plenty of other children who were doing great. She felt responsible for getting everything done, and if it was not perfect, they would criticize her, judge her, and even forbid her from the house if she had a less than perfect reaction. She said they could hurt her over and never be held accountable. She said she was tired of being hurt, judged, and pounded on for everything she did. She described making their dinner, washing their laundry, mopping their floors, and doing their dishes while being constantly criticized. She said she had served like no other daughter-in-law, probably more than any daughter except one, and that she had nothing to show for it. No love, little support, just constant attacks while they celebrated their own importance. She said she just wanted out of the pain. I do feel for Anna in that she likely did a lot for them. But at the same time, they also did a lot for her. So in one breath, I feel bad for her, because that situation does sound difficult. But at that point, they were also financially supporting her. Still, it shows the pressure she was under, and how she felt they were judging everything she did. The idea that they have so many children that when one does wrong, they can just move on to another child, seems believable in a large family like that. We have seen that with other situations in the family. Josh's anger was not only directed at Anna. In February 2022, he wrote to Michelle. He said it was hard to be in prison while everyone else was out living their lives. He said it was especially hard considering how things had been since May 2015, when everything was devastated for him and Anna, when they were cut off from public television and shunned publicly and kept at a distance by most of the family. He said no one stood with them, although privately Michelle did. He said it was as if there were 18 other kids, and life just moved on. He said damage had already started, and then only got worse. He mentioned the situation with Caleb against Anna's warnings. He said public statements and public relations work to save shows and public images were placed above family relationships, and still were. He said he still felt like Michelle worried more about public image than anything else. He said he was not trying to shift blame but asked her to consider her role and change so that other children were not in the same situation later. What is interesting here is that publicly, the family all said they were still fine with Josh. Everything seemed great. But once everything became public, then they shunned him, not because they did not know privately but because it became public. So, privately, they were totally fine with what was going on with Josh to some degree. They did not distance themselves until it became a public issue that could affect their income. They were okay with what he did when no one knew, but not okay once everyone else knew. That is exactly what we have seen with other family situations. They have not really changed. 2 days later, Josh wrote again. He apologized for not finishing the previous message. He thanked Michelle for including Anna and the children. He said he wrote from the heart, feeling very alone and abandoned. He said he wished he could go back and make changes. He said he had been upfront and apologized and tried to make amends. But he said the safe place he thought he had was not as safe as it was advertised. He said he was shamed often, both privately and publicly, and that he felt it was an effort to keep him from sinning. He said he had been paraded in front of family and church groups to share his failures, mostly to address the obvious problem and help with public perception, without considering his own emotional or spiritual well-being. He said he had heard many blanket apologies but rarely specific apologies for how parenting decisions had affected his life. He brought up the situation with Caleb again, calling those involved liars and snakes who do not care about anyone but themselves. Michelle responded to Josh by thanking him for texting and saying she was listening and would pray over his words, asking God for understanding, humility, and wisdom. Josh then wrote back that humility allows a person to admit when they are wrong, to identify wrong choices, and to correct future actions. He said admitting when you are wrong was something his parents had taught him since he was little. He said the ability to identify specific actions that have hurt others and ask for specific forgiveness is important. He said he was praying that his parents would see the level of pain they had caused him and likely other siblings as well. He said when it came to listening to Anna's cautions over the years, Anna had repeatedly felt run over and not listened to. He admitted that was his fault because he chose to listen to others over his wife. He said many times Anna would bring concerns to him, and they would go to his parents for advice, and Anna would feel ignored. He would often side with his parents' advice, which put a wedge in his marriage. He placed more value on his parents' advice than on his wife's concerns. He then said his father was often overbearing and that it was demeaning to his wife and caused her great pain. He said he was grieved because his father would not admit specific concerns about Caleb that Anna had shared literally days before everything happened. He said his father ran roughshod over her and said they needed to be more compassionate toward Caleb. Anna wanted Caleb gone once his charges were discovered, but his father said, especially in light of Josh's own choices, that they should be more compassionate and promised that Caleb would not do anything. Josh admitted he was wrong to let Caleb keep working for him. He said Anna's concerns about Caleb's behavior around the house, including crude jokes and inappropriate comments, were valid and Caleb should have been banned from the property. He said he thought his mother had concerns too, but his father felt he was right and Caleb and others kept hanging around. He said he had not heard apologies, only excuses. He said he felt like an army was against him believing the government's version of events and that everyone was excusing Caleb without considering the facts. It is very interesting that Caleb is not actually involved in this case. He has become a scapegoat for Josh. But according to what I was told by someone who was at the house during that period, Caleb used to sit under a staircase or walkway area and try to look up the skirts of young girls. He would try to flirt with and even seduce underage girls. All of this was permitted in their home. So now that Josh has been caught, they have all the sympathy in the world for Caleb, whom Josh is trying to blame. But Caleb is actually a convicted person for similar crimes. In this specific case, Caleb did not do what Josh is accusing him of. Josh is just using Caleb as a scapegoat. And they all know Caleb did not do it because the evidence against Josh is overwhelming. But it does appear that this family is okay with certain behaviors as long as they are not publicly known. They only pivot and make statements to protect themselves once the public finds out. It is the responsibility of parents, specifically Jim, Bob, and Michelle, to know who they are welcoming into their home and to not expose their children to people like that. During the same period that Caleb was staying there, Josh was being shunned by the whole family, even though on the surface they had both done similar things. Caleb actually had a child with a minor girl when he was an adult. Josh harmed his sisters when he was a minor. I am not excusing what Josh did, but there are differences. I would suspect that many of the people around them were all exposed to the same kind of content. I am not saying Caleb did what Josh did in this case. He did not. But I also do not think Josh is the only one consuming that kind of material. It is true that any time one of the children is thrown under the bus, the family just keeps moving on and acts like it is just that child's fault, not their responsibility. Josh was a child when he harmed his sisters. The way they handled it was terrible. He should have been turned over to law enforcement. He probably could have gone to juvenile court and received real consequences and actual therapy. But instead, he was sent to live in a trailer at someone's property and dug sludge out of a pond for 30 days with no one to talk to. Then he was sent to another state where he did construction work as free labor, still with no therapy. None of that helped him. If he had received proper help as a child, statistics show that minors who offend with help are less likely to offend as adults. That is really the only time effective intervention can happen. But once they become adults, it is much harder. What he did to his sisters was wrong, but how his parents handled it was equally wrong. Then they hid it from the public so they could continue their television show and make money, knowing what had happened. And as soon as it was found out, they distanced themselves from him, even though they had known the whole time. I have zero sympathy for what he did to his sisters. I have zero sympathy for the other crimes he committed. But I am also not blind to the fact that all of these children are products of their environment and their upbringing. It was their father who allowed dangerous people into their lives, normalized bad behavior, and made his sons feel like it was normal. I want to be very clear. I do not have sympathy for his crimes. But I do believe his parents have a level of accountability they have never taken, and they seem to get away with it every time. In what other circumstance do parents willingly move a convicted person into their home while they are on a nationally syndicated show, with everyone knowing what that person did, and the network does nothing? Their nanny married an offender she met at the Duggar house. There were so many dangerous people in that home. And privately, they are still connected to these people. The only thing I can think is that Anna saw red flags that Josh could not see because of how he grew up. When you are exposed to something your whole life and everyone around you says it is normal, and then someone comes in and says it is not normal, and the family makes you feel crazy for noticing, that creates a monster. Josh became what he is because of the neglect he experienced as a child, because he was the golden child, because there was never real accountability or therapy, because his family coddled him and excused his behavior and blamed his victims. But then when it all became public, suddenly Josh was the only problem. That does not make sense. It only makes sense if you understand that for them, public image is more important than anything else. I have so much more to share with you, but this is just a preview. There are 350 pages. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching.